Hello, this is Anthony Isacco back to continue on this video series about mental health during COVID-19. The first video gave a overview of the mental health concerns that are happening during COVID-19 and put a particular spotlight on grief during COVID-19. So the second part here is going to shift gears and discuss resilience and coping during COVID-19. And I think the key point here, which is important to never lose sight of, is that yes, there are concerns. Yes, we are experiencing challenges and mental health difficulties, but we're also all capable of developing and exhibiting resilience and coping during this time as well. And I know for myself and other people that I work with, friends, family members, clients, have all been able to make some adaptation, make some kind of effort to help cope with the current circumstances. So it is possible. We should expect that of ourselves to some degree as well. And usually it just requires a bit of prioritizing, a bit of motivation, whether that's internal or external motivation, and some intentionality to making sure that we can put in the appropriate time and effort to maybe do things differently to help us adapt during these trying times. So although mental health concerns might leave us vulnerable, it might contribute to a sense of despair. We are certainly capable of creating buffers in our life and propping ourselves up to some degree to enhance our capability to feel less vulnerable, to feel less despairing, and perhaps even then shift and switch the tables and have positive emotions as well, such as resiliency, which is also a state of mind, but a sense of perhaps meaning and happiness and joy, all of which are possible during this time as well. I assure you of that, even though it is difficult. So first of all, I wanted to focus on one aspect of our lives I think has been completely misunderstood during the pandemic, which is our social connections. I'm going to move my box over here so you can see this. So when the pandemic hit back in March, we were told to socially distance. What a misnomer, and a very unfortunate misnomer, because language really matters here. And socially distance has the connotation that we should avoid people, avoid social connections, avoid relationships. And I like the term physically distance, because physically distance means you can still be with other people, but of course at a safer and healthier distance from each other, with the typical guidelines being around 6 to 10 feet from each other. So I think in the early stages of the pandemic, we were told to socially distance. In some places of the country, we were also told to quarantine, and there was a stay-at-home order as well. So perhaps some of that was out of our control. But really, I want to emphasize how important it is to be with other people in a safe and healthy way. I read a research article recently in the American Psychological Association's home journal called The American Psychologist, where quoting one of the researchers that say, social belonging and support are critical to people's ability to cope and remain resilient. That's true during these challenging times of the pandemic, and it's true in any situation, in any experience, in any difficulty or challenge that we might have in life. That social network that we have, the social capital that we've built up over time, our communities and our friendships, our family members, are so important to helping us get through difficult times together. So what I would advocate for, of course, all things being considered, assuming that you don't have COVID-19 and that your doctor has cleared you for appropriate contact with others, to socially connect while being physically distant. Okay, socially connect while being physically distant. And I prefer the term physically distance to social distance any day of the week to really emphasize and reinforce that importance of being with other people. So we've had to get creative, of course, during COVID-19. And the title of this slide is Social Connections During COVID-19. And so, the typical ways that we've done this in the past, getting together for picnics, cookouts, going out to restaurants together, we've had to adapt. And so one of the biggest ways that we've had to adapt in order to facilitate those social connections is the use of technology. And the use of technology is really important. Not only has technology been used for education, instruction, work, but it has a social component too, where you can, of course, use Zoom for happy hours with friends, support groups, check-ins. I've heard from several people who have used Zoom for prayer groups and ministry groups, which are so important to our sense of community. And the other thing that I've heard about that's really important is that you can use some of the most basic technology during this time to good effect, such as just using your phone. You can do all of these things and talk with people over the phone and not be technologically savvy in any particular way. I recently heard a stat of some sort that, almost 95, 97% of people have a cell phone. So we can use that basic technology that's been part of our lives for a long time to connect with people and to build those positive social relationships during this time. In addition to Zoom and the phone, there is live streaming of services such as Mass. There's been an increase in podcasts and YouTube videos as well that have interactive components to it, such as a Q&A function or comment boxes, all to help build community as well. I'll be talking about telecounseling in a little bit more specifically, but that's a way that technology has evolved to help meet our social needs during this time. As the government restrictions have lifted, we've been able to go back into some of our social environments in safe ways, of course, in different ways, but in safe ways. I know my parish here in the North Hills of Pittsburgh is operating at a 25% capacity. So we've been able to go back to church. There's fewer people in the church building during indoor masses, but we can still see people and be with other people during that time, which is so important. Other parishes, including mine, have instituted outdoor masses. There you can get more people in a safer space because you're outside compared to inside. And so usually that involves staying in your car or in a big open field or parking lot where you can spread out and be physically distanced from each other. And so I think if it's all possible for you, because church is such a place of community, if you are able to go back to church safely, I would highly recommend you doing that. In addition to church, other social gatherings have been allowed, particularly ones that are outside. Restaurants, for example, have increased their outdoor seating capacity. They often will stagger seating as well. Sometimes they will require you to wear a mask. But that's really important to be able to maybe perhaps go out and have a meal together with some friends or family members in a safe way too. And on the other side of things, because of perhaps the stress involved in COVID-19 and dealing with everything, there might be some people in your life that might not be a positive influence on you at this particular point in time. And so I think an important part of uh, uh, building social connection during COVID-19 is also understanding those people that you might have to set boundaries with. Perhaps it's not the best time to, talk with a particular friend every single day like you used to, because it's just not good for the relationship right now or for you personally. And so understanding who those people are in your life, what are the problems or challenges in the relationship dynamics, and setting proper boundaries, I think, is also fair game in terms of building healthy relationships, during this difficult time. So here's just a few pictures of some things that I've been talking about where people have been able to be creative in order to build social relationships during this time and to stay socially connected. And so in the top left-hand picture, you see a family who was able to go to the beach. You see that they have masks on, and in the background, you don't see as many people perhaps, and that might be there in other beach pictures. So you've been able to still have some fun as a family, enjoy the beach, but less people around and the mask is on. In the photo to the top right is a adult son who is visiting his elderly father who's in the nursing home. And so if you can't tell by the picture, the son is sitting outside on one side of the building, and they're separated by the window, of course, and they're talking over the phone, and with the father being inside the facility. And so that's a great example of being physically distant but socially connected. You can see each other, you can talk, you can interact, but in a safe, healthy way given the circumstances. In the bottom left, you see the priest who is celebrating an outdoor service. Everyone has masks on who isn't speaking, and the priest is the one speaking right now, so he doesn't have a mask on, and they're physically distant from each other. And then in the bottom right-hand corner, you see a group of friends out for dinner with safely doing so with a mask on. So one of the things that you can think about right now in terms of building a social connection to help you cope with the difficult circumstances is how can you do something familiar? How can you do that differently right now? Okay, and what a great opportunity we have to be creative during a challenging time. Resilience is that ability to bounce back and overcome difficulties and persevere. And so we all have the opportunity and the capability to be resilient. And there's many ways to demonstrate resilience. Making meaning out of a particular situation, helping others, relying on our spirituality, deepening our relationship with God. Simply accepting the current situation for what it is, rather than trying to control it or change it so much. Taking care of ourselves and engaging in health behaviors, exercise, sleep, walking, meditating, prayer, all these tried and true self-care behaviors are all the more important now during this particularly difficult time. Of course, it's also important to educate ourselves and perhaps understand that, if people come to us looking for help and we're not sure, we can educate ourselves or refer them to other people, and not feel like we have to take on everybody else's problems during this time as well. We know what we know, and so if we don't know something, we can always learn more about it, ask some questions, or direct that person in our life to someone else who might know how to help them. And I think that's part of just setting a personal boundary that helps with resilience is, not feeling like we have to take on every single problem from everybody and solve every single situation or challenge that comes our way. So these are some, in addition to behaviors, I also want to tap into key attitudes towards resilience, which are really important. And those key attitudes are on the left here, and they're so important to saying these things out loud, saying them to ourselves, saying them to other people. So first one is we're in this together. So what this attitude communicates is that there's a sense of community, a sense of cohesion to dealing with the challenges of COVID-19. And there's from a spiritual perspective, you can say there's other people to shoulder the burden. Yeah. And I think that if you think of it practically, it's a lot easier to do a job with other people than to do it on your own. And in a similar way, it's a lot easier to think about how to get through this time with someone else than if you're going through it on your own. And so if you are happen to going through this on your own, then I would that's why I started this section with building social connection during this time. So you can say to this yourself and to say to someone else, hey, we're in this together. This is not anyone's fault. This is another key attitude. So it can be really easy to want to blame yourself or to blame other people, but this is a once in a generation global pandemic that is not anyone's particular fault that I'm aware of. As far as I know, this has not been traced back to any one in particular individual. So this is a natural phenomenon, unfortunate to say the least, but not anyone's fault. So avoid blaming. This too will pass is a key attitude. So, and I really believe this. This gives us hope. This gives us optimism. I really believe there's going to be a vaccine. There's going to be better medical interventions, and that we'll at one point in time we'll be able to look back on this time of pandemic. And so to think of this as a time-specific phase that we will get through and come out better on the other end is a key attitude towards resilience. And then the last two are kind of things to avoid or attitudes to avoid. First one is resisting forecasting worst case scenarios. So there's several movies out there about a pandemic and things going from bad to worse. Outbreak is one of those. It's a mid-90s movie about I believe the Ebola outbreak. And so you don't want to say, boy, this is just like Outbreak. You don't want to forecast worst case scenarios. Again, you want to think with hope and optimism. And then you also want to minimize catastrophic thinking. So catastrophic thinking is just a form of a negative kind of thinking, a negative attitude. And so, for example, this COVID-19 can dominate our conversations and our thinking. So you want to be able to get outside of that box, so to speak. Think about and talk about other things that might be going on in life, even if it feels a little artificial at first. So those are some things to minimize during this time. So resilience and coping is both behavioral, it's both attitudinal, and can facilitate positive emotional health that will help us during these challenges. Okay, so that wraps up video number 2. I will stop this video and move on into some mental health resources in video 3 that will further help in our resilience and coping.